Good evening to everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I hope that everyone is surviving this highly unusual period of time, and hopefully even somehow growing through the experience. But now that we're here, now we could just try to relax and connect and draw strength from our tradition, and also from seeing one another, which is really giving me chizuk as well. Now, over the last week or two, I've received a number of texts or emails asserting some kind of connection between COVID-19 and the Messianic era. And some have suggested that being the fact that this is such a challenging situation for the Jewish people in the world, and because of the fact that we can't even control a tiny microscopic organism, that this is causing such upheaval that it must be a harbinger of the Yemot Hamoshiach. One text that I got, which was interesting, is, and you might have seen this as well, which is the fact that, I'm trying to get the thing over here straight, okay. So you might have received a text or an email suggesting that saying that the gematria of Mashiach is 358, and the numerical value in gematria of Corona, if you spell it with an aleph and a vav, is also equal to 358. So I think that this gematria proves, without a doubt, that it is Yemot Hamoshiach, or it doesn't prove it. All right, so we really don't know whether there's any relationship between, this coronavirus and the Yemot Hamoshiach. And there's been other times over the course of history where tragedies or challenges confronted the Jewish people, and it was kind of like the psychological response of the Jews to say, the only explanation, and it was reassuring to the Jews to say that it must be that this is the Chevle Mashiach. There is such a concept in Jewish tradition called the Ikvasa de Mashiach, that the time that's right before the arrival of Mashiach. And the Gemara in Sanhedrin talks about the Chevle Mashiach, that it could be a time of really upheaval, of tumult, of challenge for the Jewish people in the world, which is perhaps a signal of Yemot Hamoshiach, and we'll touch on it a little bit more over the course of the Shir. But really, I don't know the answer to whether there's an specific association between the coronavirus and Yemot Hamoshiach. Either way, I'm very hopeful and praying that this affliction will end, that everyone should be healthy, we should hear Besorot Tovot, and we should be able to get back to normal and have shiurim, both by Zoom, but also in person. And what I'll also say is that when it comes to this conversation, so we really don't know. Here's what I'll also say, which is that I've heard a couple of people, and one rabbi really, who suggested that they know exactly why the coronavirus is occurring, and that it relates to a specific sin of the Jewish community that we must correct. Now, I fully reject this kind of approach. I think we have no way to know why things in this world happen. We do know that it's a Jewish. The Jewish response is when challenges happen to a person or a community. So of course, we always try to grow, we always try to daven, we always try to improve our behavior, but we really do not know why things happen in this world, and we certainly don't know why bad things happen to good people, why bad things happen to good communities, and why bad things happen to the world. What's interesting is that whenever you have a person or a rabbi who claims that he knows the reason for the Hurricane Katrina, or this tsunami, or this crisis, you'll notice that it tends to be a sin of a different community. And so that kind of seems to suggest that maybe we really don't know. We really don't know why these things happen. But here's what I'll say as a general comment, which is that really a Jew is always supposed to be hoping and praying for Mashiach. One of the questions that were asked when we get to Shamayim is, did you set aside times to study Torah? Nasata v'nasata b'amuna, did you deal in business with integrity? Asakta b'pirivrivia, did you try to build a family? Right, so the Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Lamed Aleph, says that there's going to be certain questions on the final. After our time of years in this world, we're going to be asked certain questions by the heavenly court. And the fourth question of those questions is Tzipita Yeshua. Did you yearn and hope for a perfected world and salvation for the world and the Jewish people? So this is part of Jewish thought, which is at all times, whether there's a virus, and hopefully soon we won't have to deal with this virus. But a Jew is always supposed to be, Tzipisa Yeshua is always supposed to be yearning and anticipating for the coming of Mashiach. We know that the Rambam has 13 foundational principles of Judaism. The first one being that a person has to believe that God created the world. And the 13th, from the 13th, which is that a Jew has to believe with complete faith that there's going to be a resurrection of the dead at a future time, which is called Tchiyat HaMeitim. And the 12th, and by the way, there's a, around the Shulchan in the center of the Chappelle Sanctuary, so the principles of the Rambam are written in a beautiful, elegant fashion on the railing of the Shulchan. So Alice Schoenfeld, I'm not sure if she's on the line, but she's often a member of this year. Alice told me that when they were building the railing, there were some suggestions that the railing should be smaller and it shouldn't take up so much space. And Oscar responded and said, well, so if that's the case, which one of the 13 principles do we have to cut out? And so, right, because if there's less space, they're not going to have the ability to record all the 13 principles on the railing of the Shulchan of Beth Jacob's Chappelle Sanctuary. But the Rambam has presents 13 foundational principles of Judaism, that if you reject any of these principles, so you're kind of outside the pale of the Jewish people. And the 12th principle of the Rambam, the 12th principle of the 13 principles is, of course, Ani Mamin Be'emunah Shalema, I believe with complete faith, B'viyat HaMoshiach, in the coming of Mashiach, V'afal pi she'it mameya, even though it might tarry, Im kol zeh achakalo, I'm always going to believe in it, and I'm always going to wait with anticipation for the arrival of Mashiach. And there's a joke about a man who was visiting his brother, and he sees him by the entrance to the city. And he says to him, what are you doing sitting here by the gate of the city? And the brother says, well, I'm paid by the city to wait for Mashiach. And he said, how much you paid? He said, well, I just get, a few rubles a week. And the brother said, that's what you sit here all day, all week for that amount of pay? And the man responded, yeah, the pay is low, but the job is very steady. And so, but joking aside, the exile of the Jewish people over the course of the last 2 millennia has been long and winding. But that's going to be the question we're going to be asked is, Tzipisa Yeshua, did you yearn for Mashiach? And the Rambam says we have to believe with complete faith that Mashiach's going to come, even though it might tarry, we believe in perfect faith in the coming of Mashiach. All right, so being the fact that people have been speaking about it with the coronavirus, we really don't know exactly, but we'll come back to that a little bit. But also, this is the month where we're coming close to the month of Nisan. Nisan has a special status in Jewish tradition, reflected in the fact that we don't say Tachman the whole month, which is exciting to some people. And the reason why Nisan has special status, for the basic reason, is because it was the month of redemption, and it was a month of redemption from Egypt. But beyond that, according to most opinions, we believe that it's going to be the month in which the future redemption takes place. All right, so this topic, thinking about Geula, thinking about redemption from this terrible disease that's afflicting the world, and redemption for the entire world that we're waiting for, is something that's part of the Jewish thought and Jewish philosophy and Jewish belief as well. Now, let me just jump in with an interesting question. And because what I want to do is I want to talk about what are the different elements of the Messianic era, and if and when we're in the Messianic era, what do we expect is going to happen? We'll try to get into a little bit, perhaps, what are the criteria for Mashiach? The Jewish people believe in a Mashiach, right? In a Melech HaMashiach. What are the criteria? What are the credentials? What does he need? A bachelor degree? Does he need a doctorate? Does he need smicha? What type of kippah is he going to wear? Does he need a beard? So but what are the criteria for Mashiach? We're not going to talk about that as much, but we are going to try to speak about what are the different elements of Mashiach and of the Messianic era. Because what are we expecting from the Jewish text, from the prophets? What are we expecting at that time that we're hoping for, that we're praying for the perfection of the world and the world to be a better place? Now, one way to attack this issue is, what about the state of Israel? So is the state of Israel possibly the beginning or part of the developing unfolding of the Messianic era? What do you think? You're welcome to put it into a chat and send me your thought. Now, the answer seems to be that on Shabbat morning, we say a tefillah that blesses the state of Israel. Now, look, we all know that there's a tremendous religious significance to the state of Israel. We, as Zionists, as proud Zionists, religious Zionists, we believe that there's religious significance to Hakamat Medina. We believe, and I believe, that the state of Israel is the conduit through which the redemption of the Jewish people is going to take place. And and moreover, right, we know that Israel is a place of refuge for the Jewish people. Israel represents the revival of the Hebrew language and the return of the Jewish people to their land. Certainly, Israel is a place which is, right, kind of like reflects the restoration of Jewish pride and the renewal of the Jewish people in the ashes of the Shoah. And so I got one comment saying that, let's hear the comments to my question of, was the establishment of the state of Israel, and could Israel be part of the Messianic era? So definitely, it started in 1948, says, I think that's from Mike Rafi. Another suggestion is, weren't many rabbis against Israel's founding because they saw it as a violation of letting Mashiach come naturally? Okay, great. So what is that mentality all about? So that's a great question. So here's what I want to point out, which is that every single Shabbos morning, we say a tefillah for the state of Israel. Am I right? And of course, when we say a tefillah, of course, we have tremendous kavanah and we pay attention to every single word that we say. So we would never say a word without understanding it and intending for its meaning. So we say in the tefillah and I'm glad that you're all not cracking up because, right? Because hopefully it is true that we have kavanah and we take our tefillot seriously. Now we say in the tefillah, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, bless the state of Israel, Reishit Tzmichat Gulatenu, the beginning of the blossoming of the redemption. So there you have it. So we're not saying that the state of Israel and the last 70 years is the redemption. We're not saying that it's the blossoming of the redemption necessarily. We're saying it's the Reishit Tzmichat Gulatenu. It's the beginning of the blossoming of the redemption. But how do we know that for sure? Isn't that a bit presumptuous to say that the state of Israel is definitively the beginning of the Messianic era, the beginning of the process of redemption? How do we know that? Now, Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb, I think this was in the 60s, maybe in the 70s, he added one word to the tefillah. He said that when you say the tefillah, so you have to say, Avinu Shebashamayim Tzorei V'Go'alo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, bless the state of Israel, Shetehei Reishit Tzmichat Gulatenu, that it should become the beginning of the blossoming of the redemption. And it was a hope and it was a prayer. However, right? Our communities, we say it as more of a statement that bless the state of Israel, reishit michat gulatenu. So what I want to point out is, and this gets us now into the discussion in terms of what exactly is going to happen in the Messianic era. And what do the Jewish people need to accomplish on their own to help make it happen? Do the Jewish people have a role, or is it just all coming from Hashem? So the Mishnah and the Rambam says as follows. Says that there are three different mitzvot, there are three different commandments that the Jewish people are going to fulfill when they enter the land. How's everyone doing? Give me a thumbs up if you guys are good. You hear me? Okay. Very good. There we go. There we go. Rabbi Myrna's showing off by putting up a thumbs up. But you could do that. You could just go on reactions and you can give a thumbs up and maybe give a smile or a clap or something like that. So here you have it. That the Mishnah and the Rambam says, thank you, Mike. So the Mishnah and the Rambam says that the Jewish people are going to fulfill three mitzvos when they enter the land. These mitzvos were fulfilled when they entered the land in the days of Yehoshua. And it's understood by the rabbis that this is going to be what the Jewish people are going to fulfill when we return to the land, Yemot Hamoshiach. The first mitzvah is that we're going to appoint a king. The second mitzvah is that we're going to wipe out Amalek. And the third mitzvah, which is what we're going to do, is we're going to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. So that's one template and one paradigm of understanding a few of the steps of the Messianic era, which is those three steps. Now, the Ramban and many other commentaries point out that it's really not necessary to appoint a melech. In other words, the monarchy is not the only form of government from a Jewish perspective. It might not even be the ideal form of government. The Ramban and other Mefarshim say that when the Mishnah says that the Jewish people have to fulfill this mitzvah, being Mammon and Melech, when they come into the land, what it really means is as follows. What it means is that we need to establish an independent, sovereign government. And it could be a monarchy, it could be a benevolent monarchy, it could be a democracy with a Knesset, that is a fulfillment of the mitzvah. And so I think it's compelling. I think one can make a compelling argument, and I believe this deep in my heart, that the state of Israel is not only religiously significant, it's not just a conduit of the future redemption, it's not just a place of refuge, it's not just a place that gives us a tremendous amount of Jewish pride, but I believe really that we are in the beginning steps of the Messianic era. We're somewhere in the Messianic era. How do I know that from a halachic textual basis? Well, I know that because we've already accomplished, according to many opinions, the first of the three mitzvos. We've appointed, right, the first of the three mitzvos, what is to appoint a melech. A melech doesn't necessarily mean a king. It means to have a democratic, meaning it means to have an independent government where you're self-governing, where you're there's self-determination, and you're not ruled or governed by any foreign power. We are blessed to live in a generation where we have the miracle of Israel. And the miracle of Israel includes the fact that we have this independent self-governance, of course. We have an army, we have a government, we have everything else, we have an infrastructure, and we have a state. Now, together with this is the tradition. Now, how do you know? God forbid, maybe, who knows? Maybe they will take, instead of taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back, maybe we'll take 2 steps back, 1 step forward, God forbid. So I once learned from my Rebbeim, the Ramban has a very important position, which is that the Jewish tradition is that there's only going to be two destructions. There's going to be a Churban Rishon of the first temple, of the first Jewish commonwealth, and then there was a destruction of the second commonwealth. There was one Tochacha in Parshat Bechukotai, which is symbolic of the first destruction, and then we have the second Tochacha in Parshat Kitavo, which is signifying of the destruction of the second commonwealth. The Jewish tradition is that there's just going to be 2 destructions. And we hope and pray that this is true, that there will never be another destruction of a Jewish commonwealth. And so if you adhere to that tradition, and we incorporate that Mishnah in Sanhedrin, that once you appoint a king or a government, as understood by Ramban, then that's already one of the steps of the Geula process. So that's the halachic basis for saying Berechem Medinat Yisrael Reishit Tzmichat Gulatein. That it's the beginning of the process of the redemption. Now, aside from that paradigm of those three, what are some other elements? What are some other elements of Yemot Hamoshiach? And I want to get back to the question now. That's from Israel. Is that Israel? Or remind me your name. You have an interesting name, and you're such an intelligent guy. But remind me your name, please.
Oh, Sully.
Sully, right? That's Sully. Yeah. That's right. Okay, Sully. Yeah. So I knew. So Sully. So Sully wonders, what about the rabbis who are anti-Zionistic, where they say that we have to let Mashiach come organically or naturally when Hashem wants to bring it?
I actually remember the author, Isaac Bashevis Singer. His father was one of these rabbis who was very angry that his son supported Zionism because he saw it as going against the Torah and what it says about how Mashiach should come. Anyway.
Okay, so we're gonna come back to that. All right, what are the different elements of Mashiach? So one element that's discussed in the prophets is that there's going to be in Sefer Yirmiyahu Perek Tet Zayin. It said there's going to be a kibbutz galiot, that ki imchai Hashem esher helet b'nei Yisrael me'eretz tzafon mikol ha'artzot asher idicham shama, that Hashem is going to bring back the Jews from all the lands to which they were scattered. Vashivosim al admasam. So Yirmiyahu is speaking about a future time, and he's saying that God is going to bring back the Jewish people from the four corners of the world to the land of Israel. So kibbutz galiot is one element of the Messianic era, the Jews coming back to the land of Israel. Another element is that the Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt. In Sefer Yeshaya, it says, "V'haya b'acharit hayamim," it's going to be at the end of days. Nachon yeh har Beis Hashem. Isaiah is speaking about a future time in history where he says that the house of God is going to be rebuilt. So the building of the Beis HaMikdash is an element of the Messianic era. Now, with the first element I just mentioned, right, with 600,000 Jews in 1948 and now over 6 million Jews in Israel, so that's right, and with 100,000 Ethiopian Jews coming back to Israel, and the miracle of over 1 million Jews from the former Soviet Union coming back to Israel, and Aliyah, of course, that's happening all the time from the United States and from Europe, right? So this is kibbutz galios happening in front of our eyes. In terms of the Beis HaMikdash, while there are a lot of shuls in Israel, but we still don't have yet the Beit HaMikdash. Now, the third element that's mentioned also in the book of Yeshaya is Lo yisagoy al goy cherev, v'lo yilmedu od milchama, that nation will not lift up sword against nation, and war will not be known any longer. In other words, the time of Mashiach is going to be not just a time of that relates to the Jewish people, where the Jewish people come back to Israel. Number two, where the Jews rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, but there's also a period that relates to the whole world, and that it's going to usher in, the time of Mashiach is going to usher in a time of peace for the world. The Heishav Levavos Albanim Ubanim Alavosab, and parents will be reconnected to children, and children will be reconnected to parents. That relates to the Jewish people, but also perhaps to the entire world. There's going to be a resolving of the tension that exists now between the generations. We're going to remove the generation gap. And also it's going to be a time of peace and tranquility for the entire world, which I'm going to come back to in a moment because there's an interesting debate about that point. Finally, another element that seems to be a prelude for Yemot HaMoshiach is the Milchemet Gog uMagog. Most commentaries understand it to be Gog, king of Magog. that is going to be an evil nation and an evil king, and it's going to spark a major, major world war. I think it's fair to say, based on my knowledge of the sources, it's fair to say, and I'm hoping that Nazi Germany in World War II was the Gog and Magog. In other words, I'm hoping and praying that it happened already. And we don't know exactly. Again, we don't know if and when, we don't know when Mashiach is coming. We don't know exactly why things are happening and how to describe things. But what I can say is that I think it's fair to say that the Shoah and World War II, with the millions dead, and of course the Shoah, the destruction of European Jewry, and Nazi Germany, I think it's fair to say, in my view, that they could fit the description of Gog and Magog. Hitler being Gog, Magog being Nazi Germany. Now that gets us into this concept of Chevlei Mashiach, that there is a concept that before Mashiach is going to be a challenging, difficult time. A little bit like when a mother gives birth to a baby and it's a great simcha, but the time of the pregnancy and the time of the labor, you have those birth pangs that are very difficult, are very painful even. And that's a harbinger of a beautiful, beautiful celebratory time up ahead. And this concept is reflected in Jewish thought. This whole notion of Melchemet Gog and Magog, right? We don't say that it's going to be, that we're just going to be a linear upward movement towards Yemot Hamoshiach, and that it's going to happen quickly and spontaneously necessarily, but it's going to be something that's going to be possibly very rocky, difficult, challenging, windy, and that there's a Melchemet Gog and Magog. And if that's the case, if there's Chevlei Mashiach, look, we don't know if a coronavirus is part of Chevlei Mashiach or not, but at least that concept fits into Jewish thought, that when something bad happens, really bad, and there's an upheaval of the world, who knows, maybe things are happening in the world, who knows, and we're hopeful, we're always hopeful, that this is leading to better times up ahead and light at the end of the tunnel. In the 17th century, there were these terrible, terrible, devastating Chmielnicki massacres that killed tens of thousands, where tens of thousands of Jews were murdered. Many of the Jews at that time were convinced that it must be, and they reassured themselves, and maybe they try to give an explanation for it, but they convinced themselves that it must be that was Chevlei Mashiach, that is birth pangs of Mashiach. That's the whole foundation, that's the whole setup of Shabtai Tzvi. And the rise of this charismatic personality of Shabtai Tzvi, where a lot of people in the Jewish world believed he was Mashiach, was set up because of the Chmielnicki massacres that occurred during that time and right before his rise, where people said it must be that that's Chevlei Mashiach, and it must be that Mashiach is coming soon, and that kind of set the foundation for Shabtai Tzvi, who of course was a false Messiah. And so there is such a concept in Jewish tradition of Chevlei Mashiach. The Melchemet, the war of Gog and Magog, is something that the prophets speak about in Sefer Yecheskel and other places, but mainly Sefer Yecheskel, of the war of Gog and Magog. And so there is such a concept, but there were previous times in history where Jewish people thought that challenges and tragedies were the birth pangs of Mashiach, when it wasn't the birth pangs of Mashiach. And so we should approach all these things with a certain level of humility. If this time of the coronavirus teaches us anything, it's that it's that with all our medical and technological advances, we have this tiny microscopic organism that's 1/900th the width of a human hair, and we cannot control it, and it's devastating the world, and it's changed around our whole lives and schedules, and we're nervous about it, and we have to take it seriously. But it's a humbling, it really teaches us the message of humility, that really HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in control, and that we have a lot of plans and visions and dreams, but really ultimately, Atzas Hashem Hi Takum. So those are some of the elements of Yemot Hamoshiach. What do we got? We got Kibbutz Goliot, return of the Jewish people. Number 2, the building of the Beit HaMikdash. Number 3, peace peace in the land and peace in the entire world. Number 4 is Milchemet Gog Umagog, right? So those are some different elements of the time of Mashiach. Now, we also know at the time of Mashiach that there's going to be the resurrection of the dead. That's Chiyat HaMeitim as well. And that's kind of like its own, amazing miracle that's going to happen. B'mosa Mashiach, we believe with perfect faith that there is going to be resurrection of the dead. Resurrection is not to be confused with reincarnation. Reincarnation is a different thing. Reincarnation is a matter of great debate among the Jews, among Jewish thinkers and rabbis. Reincarnation means the soul of one body gets inserted into a different body. And there's different gilgulim, different iterations where the soul goes into different bodies. That's a separate shear. That's a separate topic. And that's a matter of debate. I believe the Rambam did not believe. The Rambam did not believe in Gilgul Nishamot and reincarnation. But some rabbis, leading rabbis, did believe it and do believe it. But what I'm talking about is Chiyat HaMeitim is different. That's resurrection. And that is a core foundational Jewish belief, which is that death is the separation of the body from the soul. The soul goes to the world of souls, or Olam Haba, as the Rambam calls it. And I say the Rambam because that's a whole debate in terms of what exactly is Olam Haba. And we believe in the world to come, and the Rambam says the world to come is here now, right? Anyone who passes away, the soul, if the soul merits it through good deeds in his or her lifetime, goes to the world to come. And then resurrection is a reuniting of the body and soul, a body with its own soul. All right? So that's something that we believe is going to happen b'mosa Mashiach. But here's something interesting, which is that when it comes to these different elements of Yemot Hamoshiach, so how different really will the world be b'Yemot Hamoshiach? So this is a fascinating debate between the Rambam and the Ravid, who got into many debates. The Ravid was of the opinion that really the Messianic era is going to be an upending, a reversal of all the laws of nature. It's going to be a miraculous period of time in which everything is going to be remarkably different. So it's the elements that I mentioned, and it's going to be almost like Lamala Min HaTeva. This fits with the Ramban. The Ramban says that's really what we call Olam Haba. The Ramban, Nachmanides, says that when a person passes away in 2019, 2020, then the soul goes to a place called Olam HaNeshamot, the world of souls. As I mentioned earlier, the Rambam says no, that a soul goes, if he or she merits it, the soul goes to Olam Haba. But the Ramban says no. The Ramban says Olam Haba is at a future point in time. The Ramban, as opposed to the Rambam. The Ramban says Olam Haba is at a future point in time. When a person passes away in 2019, 2020, so then the soul goes to a world of souls. But when there's Yemot Hamoshiach, that's when the person is brought back to this world, which is called resurrection. And that person is then, once he or she is resurrected and has the privilege of enjoying Chiyat HaMeitim, or at least being brought back to this world. I'm not sure whether the process of being brought back is going to be enjoyable or not, or neutral. But once a person is brought back to this world, the Ramban says that then the person is going to live forever. And that is what is considered Olam Haba, according to the Ramban. So the Ramban calls the Messianic era Olam Haba. The Rambam and most opinions, I believe, say that no, Olam Haba is around now, and it's where the soul goes. And the Rambam says this, that when a person, and many opinions is that after resurrection and in the Messianic era, so then the person will live, but then the person will pass away. So this gets back to, just to circle back to, try to clarify, the Ravid is of the opinion that Yemot Hamoshiach is going to be a supernatural existence. His proof from the Torah is V'hishbati chaya ra'a min haaretz. The pasuk says in Parshat Bechukotai that at that time there's going to be a time of peace for the world, and B'cherev lo tavro be'artzachem, and that I'm going to eliminate all wild or dangerous animals from the world. So that sounds like a change of some of the laws of nature, at least in terms of the disposition and character of the animals. And so the Ravid says, that's the Ravid's position. The Rambam disagrees. The Rambam, I guess, consistent with his approach of being a rationalist, even though the Rambam agreed and believed in Tchiyat HaMetim, but the Rambam is of the opinion that the world will still follow natural law. Much of what we witness and experience in this world today in 2020 will continue in the Messianic era. Yes, there'll be miraculous things, such as the resurrection of the dead. Yes, there'll be miracles in which God will reveal himself to the world in some fashion. But really the main difference between this world and Yemot Hamoshiach, according to the Rambam, is, he says it in a very, very striking language. He says, Ein ben Olam hazel Yemot Hamoshiach. There's no difference between this world and Yemot Hamoshiach. Ella shibud malchiot bilvad. Shibud malchiot means to be controlled and dominated by a foreign power. Shibud malchiot means to live in a state in which we're oppressed, and we're submissive, and we're enslaved or persecuted by another government, whether it's in Israel or anywhere else. And so the main feature of the Rambam is that in the Yemot Hamoshiach, we're not going to be subservient, and we're not going to be under the domination of any foreign governments. Now, so the question is whether that has been accomplished already in our time when we have an independent state of Israel, which has a government, or almost has a government, or almost has a coalition. We're getting there. Maybe, hopefully, we won't have to have another election. But so I think what it also means is that we'll reach a point where not only will we have an independent government, but it'll be a time where there won't be the double standard that Israel is held to, that we won't have all the anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism and all the decrees from the United Nations. That's part of Shibud Malchiot. That's part of the nations of the world ganging up against Israel, which shows that we're not yet there yet. We've made a tremendous amount of progress. I do believe in my heart that we're in the beginning of the process of the redemption, as I explained already. And Kibbutz Goliot has happened. And there's also the blossoming of the land of Israel, which is also spoken about by the prophets. But we still have a far way to go. But the Rambam, what I'm suggesting is that there's a very interesting debate between the Ramban and the Rambam, and let me put it a different way, between the Ravid and the Rambam, right? How do we even understand the Messianic era? According to the Ravid, it's going to be a miraculous existence. According to the Rambam, it's going to be more of a natural state of existence, where you're still going to have the laws of physics and natural laws. We're still going to have cell phones and electronics, but it'll just be a time of peace. It'll be a time when we all recognize the God of the world, and there will be a Beit HaMikdash, and the Jewish people will come back to Israel and be able to live freely without any domination of a foreign power. Now, how does the Rambam understand that pasuk where it says that I'm going to eliminate all the dangerous animals of the world? Right? So the Ravid had said that you see from that pasuk that you see, look, the nature of the animals are going to change. I'm going to eliminate all the dangerous animals from the world, God says, in the Torah. So the Rambam addresses that head on, and he says that that's really a metaphor for the nations of the world. That when the Torah says that I'm going to eliminate all wild animals from the world, what it really means is, that the Jewish people are the kind, gentle animal, and it's the wild, dangerous animal that represents, the evil regimes of the world. So, that's the famous pasuk that the wolf is going to lie with the lamb, right? I think there's a restaurant in New York called Wolf and Lamb, and that in the Yemot Hamoshiach, the spears are going to be turned into plow tools, right? And there won't be any war any longer. And we quoted that pasuk, Lo Yisrael Goy El Goy Cherev V'lo Yamudu Ad Milchama, and that gar hazeev im namer, that basically the lamb will be able to lie with the wolf, will lie with the zeev. So I once heard that yes, the lamb will be able to lie with the wolf, but he'll always lie with one eye open, always being suspicious of the wolf. In any case, that's the way the Rambam understands. Yemot Hamoshiach. So this gets us into exactly how is the Messianic era going to happen. There's really a couple different modes of how it can happen. In other words, the Ravid has one understanding, but the Rambam has an entirely different understanding. What now I want to suggest to you is the fact that it could be that it's a couple of different modes to how it's going to happen. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, I just sent a text to my wife to tell people upstairs to stop banging. I'm not sure if it's bothering you, but in any case, I try to keep things down in the house. These are the Zoom challenges of learning. Okay, so here's a major takeaway of the Shir that I'm going to share with you. That while the Rambam and Ravid have two very different conceptions of Yemot Hamoshiach, isn't that interesting? That there's certain elements that are going to happen, but there's kind of difference of opinion in terms of whether it's going to be miraculous or a natural state of existence, the Messianic era. And here's what I want to share with you, which is that maybe it's possible that we could have both, or one or the other, and at points in between. Because the Gemara in Sanhedrin is a key Gemara, which says as follows. It says, Gemara Sanhedrin, Sari Chesam and Aleph, says that the pasuk says, Be'ita achi shena, that there's going to come a time, and there's going to be a revival, Be'ita, at its time, achi shena, I will bring it speedily. So the Gemara wonders and says, which one is it? Is it that it's going to come in its time, or is it going to happen speedily? It seems like an internal contradiction. The Gemara raises another question, which is that there's one pasuk that says that Mashiach's going to come im ananei shemaya. He's going to come from the heavens. He's going to come from the clouds. And another pasuk says at the end of Zechariah that the Mashiach's going to come ani rochev ala chamor, like a poor person riding on a donkey. Right? That's a famous pasuk about Mashiach, and it's from Zechariah. That the Mashiach is going to come like, so which one is it? Is he going to come, like with pomp and circumstance, and it's going to be just, it's going to be a very celebratory and miraculous arrival of Mashiach? Or is it going to be in a much more humble type of fashion where it's like a poor person riding on a donkey? And why does it have to be a donkey? I don't know. Does that mean it's going to be a Dodge Neon? Maybe he can afford a Honda Accord, maybe even a Lexus. Who knows what he's going to be able to afford when he comes. But how do we resolve these two contradictions, right? One pasuk says, Be'ita achi shena. It's one pasuk, Be'ita achi shena. So is it in its time, whenever that's going to happen? Or is it achi shena, I'm going to bring it along speedily? And the second thing is, how is Mashiach going to come? Is it going to be with pomp and circumstance from the clouds? Or is it going to be in a very humble, lowly fashion, riding on a donkey? And so the Gemara has a remarkable, astonishing response that is so, so important in understanding the Messianic era. The Gemara says that Zachu, if the Jewish people merit it and are deserving of it, because we also know that we have to do tshuva along the way in the process to bring along Mashiach. That's a piece of it. But if the Jewish people merit it, then achi shena, then it's going to happen speedily, and then Mashiach's going to come from the heavens in a very glorious way. But lo zachu, if we don't merit it through our actions, then be'ita, then it's going to happen in its time, in its designated time, and it's not necessarily going to happen speedily. And then Mashiach's going to come in a humble, lowly fashion. The Or HaChaim says that, so what the Gemara is suggesting is two possible modes of how Mashiach's going to come and how the Messianic era is going to unfold. It's suggesting that it could happen in a miraculous, speedy fashion, based on our actions or based on divine wisdom, or it could also happen in a very slow and humble, lowly, perhaps gradual fashion, also depending on our behavior. And it's very, very interesting that there are psukim in the Parshat Balak that allude to Mashiach. The pasuk says, Erenu v'lo ata. This is Balak prophesying and ending up blessing the Jewish people. It says, Erenu v'lo ata, I see it, but not now. Ashurenu v'lo karov. I'm able to envision it, but it's not close. Darach kochav meYakov, a star is shooting forth from Jacob. Become shevet miYisrael, and a scepter will rise out of Israel. So Rashi says this is referring to David HaMelech. But the Ramban and others say that this whole pasuk and these psukim are referring to the Mashiach. And he says like a star is going to come across the sky, revealing the light of God to the world. Become shevet miYisrael, a scepter, meaning like a king, will arise out of Israel at that time. But the Or HaChaim has a brilliant shot where he says, why does it say, Erenu v'lo ata, ashurenu v'lo karov? I see it, but not now. And I envision it, ashurenu, but it's not close, v'lo karov. So the Or HaChaim connects it to the Gemara that we just learned. And the Or HaChaim says that if it happens, we merit it, so then it's going to be speedy, right? It's going to be achishena. It's going to be that the Mashiach is going to come from the clouds, and then it's erenu v'lo ata. I see it, but it's not now, but it's very close to me. I can see it in front of me. And it's going to happen very, very soon. But the other possibility the Or HaChaim says is, if lo zachu, if we don't merit it, and if God in his divine wisdom doesn't think that we merit it, so then bi'ita, it's going to happen in its time, in its designated time. It'll be in a much more humble, lowly, and gradual fashion. And then it's ashurenu, I envision it for lo karo, but it's a little bit more distant. And it's going to take a little bit more time to get there. And so Sully asked in terms of let me say it a different way. Is it possible to say that the settlement and the growth of Israel is the Messianic era? So, you might say that these are explicit miracles that are happening in our era. And of course, other people have another view where they don't necessarily see God's hand in 40, 48, and 56, and 67, and throughout the course of Israel's marvelous, glorious, challenging, but amazing history. But the major question you could ask is, but this is redemption. I thought redemption is it's Mashiach, is Beis HaMikdash, is Beis HaMikdash coming from heaven, and could it be that the Messianic era is unfolding in such a gradual way? So Rav Teichtel, in his Sefer Eim Habanim Smecha, and this gets to Sully's point, he says yes. He says that you see from the Gemara that there's different modes of how the Messianic era is going to unfold. The key elements we discuss, which is the return of the Jewish people to the land, and it's that there's going to be, peace in the world, and the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, and also there's going to be Jewish people establishing their own government. A couple of them seems like we're making progress on, a couple that we haven't made progress on. And if you remember, I mentioned that there's 3 mitzvot. One is appointing a king or a government. Number 2 is wiping out Amalek. And we're in that process of fighting against our enemies and eliminating our enemies. Or if they agree to make peace with us, that's even better. But what you see is that there's certain elements that are part of the Messianic era. Okay, that's part of Jewish belief. there are also different elements in terms of who's going to be Mashiach. It says that he has to be a scholar that inspires the Jewish people. It also says that he has to be somebody who spearheads and leads the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. And the Rambam brings some other things. He has to be someone he's going to fight the wars of God. So the Rambam in Hilchot Malachim, Perek Yud Aleph, Halacha Dalet, he talks about what are the different criteria of Mashiach, but certainly one of them, according to the Rambam, is that he has to spearhead the building of the Beit HaMikdash. And any person who lives, and he could be an amazing rabbi, very charismatic, that inspires millions, but if he dies before the building of the Beit HaMikdash, it sounds like from the Rambam and mainstream Jewish thought that individual could have been an amazing rabbi, but he's not Mashiach. And but even though there's certain elements to who Mashiach is, and there's different elements in terms of the Messianic era, what Rav Tachtel points out is that there's different ways that it could happen. And here's a key point, which is, if it happens in a miraculous, speedy way, then it doesn't require our involvement as much. However, if it happens in a more gradual way, at its designated time, as like a poor person riding on a donkey, so then Rav Tachtel in his Sefer Em Habanim Smecha says, if that's the case, it's going to happen still with the divine providence, of course, guiding the way, miracles in this modern generation, but that if it happens in this gradual way, then it would require the participation of the Jewish people to a greater degree to make it happen. And that's generally with redemption. We see it in Yetziat Mitzrayim itself, that God says, I don't want you to engage in excessive prayer, but rather I want you to move forward, to surge forward and enter the sea and make the redemption happen. God assists those who help themselves. And that's one of the core beliefs of religious Zionists, which is that we don't just wait passively for God to bring the Mashiach. We don't just wait passively for God to bring blessings to us, right? But we have to take the steps using our Tzelem Elokim, because God asks us to be senior partners with Him to bring blessings to our lives, do chesed for others, and also make the redemption happen. And so this is an amazing, I think this statement, Ani rochav al chamor, which shows also that it could be, have you ever ridden a donkey? Right? It's bumpy. It could be, it's a walk, it's a step to the side, it's a step this way, and it could be a very bumpy ride. And so Yemot Hamoshiach is something that's not necessarily going to be smooth, but it could very well be bumpy. We hope that it's something that where there's a constant, steady progression going up, in a bull market towards ultimately the redemption of Israel. But we have to do our part, I think, in terms of believing in Hashem and believing in Yemot Hamoshiach, hoping and praying and anticipating the arrival of the Messianic era and Mashiach. And then it's doing our part. It's doing our part to do chesed for one another, to do tshuva, to do chesed for one another, to advocate for Israel, to help push the redemption along. Because it's not just that God brings redemption to us, it's that we have to partner with Him and serve as an agent to Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi is going to be the one to announce the coming of Mashiach. And the commentaries point out that, wait a second, sometimes there's some sources that say he's going to come at this time, and other sources that say it's going to come at another time. It doesn't seem like there's a definitive timeline of Yemot HaMashiach. So that's what some explain and say, it all depends. If it's going to be speedy and miraculous, then it might come even before Eliyahu has a chance to make it to our Pesach Seder. Mashiach might come, and then Eliyahu will come along with it. But if it happens in a different way, then maybe Eliyahu is going to be the one to herald the coming of the Mashiach. So we don't even know the exact timeline, because there's all different ways and methods in which the process could happen. If anyone wants to share and so look, we hope and pray in every tefillah that we should merit the Yemot HaMashiach and a better world and a perfected world. We also, and especially during this challenging time, we hope and pray for a light at the end of this tunnel. And whether it's Yemot HaMashiach or not, what I do know, because when somebody asked me and said, oh, is coronavirus a harbinger of the Yemot HaMashiach? I said, I really don't know. I said, it really doesn't affect our general philosophy, because we always have to be hoping and praying for Mashiach. And certainly we hope and pray that Hashem should bring refuah. He should bring refuah to all those affected. He should bring refuah to the world. But what I do know more definitively, separate from Corona, what I do know is about the state of Israel. I think you gotta, Shir Hamalos B'Shuva Hashem Shivat Zion Hayinu K'Cholmim, right? When God returns the captives of Zion as Shivat Zion Hayinu K'Cholmim, we were like dreamers. And what it means is we were like dreamers because it's an amazing period of time to be part of the redemption of Israel. But maybe also when redemption happens, sometimes we're like dreamers. We don't even realize it's happening in front of our eyes. We don't realize what a blessed generation we're living in. And so with everything going on in Israel, but also with everything going on in the Jewish people, because we're playing a role as well, I believe this is Reishis Michot Gulatenu, and we just have to do our part to pray and hope to keep moving the chains, as they say in football, keep getting the first downs, moving the needle in the right direction, and hopefully that beginning of the blossoming should become the blossoming, and that should become the complete redemption for the Jewish people and the world.
Rabbi, thank you very much. I just would like to mention, you said about Israel. If you look at the history from the time Israel began, particularly, my husband was in the 6-Day War, and he said, we have a book here, I forgot the rabbi's name, from Israel, and he says that Milchemet Sheshet Hayamim was a total miracle. The pilots said that they were like carried on wings.
Wow.
They were not actually flying. It was as
Wow.
if someone was carrying them. And if you look around, each time the rockets fall, and usually there are no people who get hurt or very few people, that's miraculous each time that happens.
There's a member of the shul whose name is Anita Winselberg. And if anyone is friendly with Anita, so please let her know that I quoted her and I gave her a shout out in the shir. And over the course of our 11 years of study, and Anita has attended an average of 2 or 3 classes a week with me over the years. She attends Shabbos morning. She also attends the Monday class. And so Anita, whenever I mention this concept of Israel and whether it's miraculous, she says that that in some military academy, maybe it's the one at Kings Point, in some military academy, they don't even teach the 6-Day War as part of the military maneuvers.
Correct.
And they explain the reason is because that's not natural, that's miraculous.
Exactly.
So that's not something that we can necessarily learn from. She says
Amen.
it in a much more poetic way than I do, eloquent way. Any other, what I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute all, or you know what, if you could unmute yourself if you want to ask something. Meanwhile, if you want to ask something, please speak up. Meanwhile, I'm going to look at the questions to see if there's any other questions. Yes, even according to the Rambam's view, where everything stays relatively normal, the Rambam's view, that everything stays relatively normal, won't some things still be miraculous? Yes. The resurrection of the dead, right? Chiyat HaMeitim is going to be miraculous. The fact that there's going to be peace in the world, that's going to be miraculous. So I did mention that yes, the Rambam agrees that there will be some miraculous elements to the Yemot Hamoshiach. During the Messianic era, will we all be in Israel? Will Israel just become the whole world? No, there'll be Israel and there'll be the rest of the world. And everyone will have a certain recognition that of God. But it's Kamayim Liyam Mechasim. The pasuk says that like water fills the ocean. That's going to be the knowledge of God. Why that metaphor of like water fills the ocean? Because depending on what level you're on, that's how much knowledge you're going to have of God, even Yemot Hamoshiach. You know, in an ocean, there's water everywhere. But you have some places that have 3 feet of water, and then some places that have 20 feet of water, and then some places that have, I don't know, like a mile or 2 of water, right? So that there's going to be knowledge of God, Yemot Hamoshiach, Kemayim Liyam Mechasim, like water fills the ocean. And what that means is that people, even Yemot Hamoshiach, are going to be on different levels, depending on what level you're on, and where your intellect is at, and where your character is at, and your Jewish observance and your character. So that's going to affect what level of knowledge of God you have Yemot Hamoshiach. Okay, we got one new message. When asked about the Mashiach, Rabbi Kanievsky said that he is holding regular meeting with Mashiach. What do you think of this? Are you sure that he said something like that? That he's holding a regular meeting with Mashiach?
I don't believe that.
I don't know. So I'd like to see. I'm not sure if he said that, Rachel. And if he did, so that's good to know. You know, but okay. I see a Carol. I see a Carol Oken, I think, on the line. I see a Mitch. I see a Shelley. I see Nechama.
Betzalel.
And I see Alice. I see Alice and Sandy. So I unmuted everyone. If you want to speak up, you're welcome to speak up.
I have a question.
Yep.
You talked about Gilgul Neshamot and about resurrection. If a Gilgul Neshama, the Neshama goes into someone else's body, how would that work with resurrection? You're supposed to go back into your own body.
Yes, that's a whole other topic, and that's one of the questions that the anti-reincarnation, not anti, but those who don't believe in reincarnation, that's one of their questions and arguments against reincarnation, is that if there's reincarnation, so then you have one soul that's associated with different bodies, then how does that then how are we going to understand what's going to happen in the days of Tchiyat HaMeitim? So that's a whole separate issue that's going to require a whole other discussion. It's a great question.
Isn't someone who got married multiple times after their spouse died an also kind of confusing point?
What?
For during Mashiach, like if someone when they were alive was married and then that person passed away, so they married someone else. But if both wives come back alive, who are they married to?
Yeah, that's also a question. Another question that the Gemara addresses is when you come, let's say a person passes away from an illness of some kind. And I guess whether it's old age or illness, or however a person passes away, when a person is brought back to life, do they come back healthy or do they come back with that illness? And the Gemara seems like it resolves this question by saying that the person comes back in a similar fashion, perhaps with the body in a compromised state of illness, but that then the body is quickly healed and then is able to live, during that time. So it's just an interesting food for thought. Okay, so everyone looks great. You look great, and it's so nice to see your Sever Panam Yafot. Nice to see your smiles, and thank you so much for joining us. And stay strong, stay healthy.
Rabbi, stay safe and healthy.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Amen. To you as well. Amen. To you all as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Myrna. Thank you, Rachel, Nechama. Give everyone a shout out. Sully, Avi, Sandy, all the best, everyone. Abby, all the best.
All the best.
Take care. And Miriam Alperin, you still on? Yeah, I think she's muted, so she's not able to speak. Anyway, Laila Tov, everyone. Thanks so much for joining, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for the class.
Okay, good. Thank you so much, Abby. It came through okay in terms of the sound and everything?
Excellent.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Laila Tov.